Imagine a world where danger lurks at every shore, and survival depends not just on swordplay, but on skill, ingenuity, and sheer grit. Pirates weren't just reckless outlaws, they were master craftsmen, engineers, and strategists who built hidden camps, fought disease, and kept their ships battle-ready far from any friendly port. How did these sea rogues maintain their deadly vessels and protect their secret hideouts against relentless enemies? In the daily life of pirates, much of what kept them operational depended on the skills and resources available in their temporary camps. One of the most complex and essential facilities they needed was the smithy, a place where metalwork was carried out. Unlike the simpler tents or shelters, a smithy required a forge, proper bricks for the hearth, and skilled workers such as bricklayers and brickmakers. Setting up a smithy was no small task, but when done properly, it was a vital asset for any pirate crew. Iron was a rare and precious resource in the era of piracy. It was often difficult to come by, and where it was available, it was typically carefully conserved. This scarcity meant that pirates had to be inventive with how they used metal. For example, in shipbuilding, iron nails were often replaced with wooden ones called T-nails. These were easier to produce and didn't require scarce ironwork they could capture or scavenge from their victims. The metal itself was versatile. Anything made of iron could be melted down and reforged into new items, which allowed the pirates to maintain and improve their ships and weapons. In fact, some pirate crews reportedly melted down captured swords and other metal goods to produce nails and tools. This process required a skilled smith, and such craftsmen were invaluable to any crew. One example of this was a privateer named Pleston, whose skill and ingenuity were well documented by Captain Shellvac. Over a couple of months, Pleston managed to create a wide range of tools and equipment that greatly improved the crew's effectiveness. Among his creations were double-headed maul hammers, chisels, gimlets, bullet molds, and even cartridge boxes fashioned from old gun carriage trunks. These cartridge boxes were covered with sealskins, making them not only functional, but also neat in appearance. Pleston's work extended beyond personal gear. He was able to produce any ironwork the ship's carpenter required, and even finish building a large serviceable boat, something the crew desperately needed. His skill demonstrated just how important a good smith was to the pirates, turning what might have been a simple camp forge into a center of productivity and innovation. The smithy was also crucial for ship repairs, especially in the harsh tropical climates where many pirate crews operated. Ships were vulnerable to damage not just from battle, but from the environment. The tropical sun, salty sea air, and marine organisms all took their toll on wooden vessels. A skilled smith could repair cannons, tools, fittings, and any iron hardware damaged during a voyage or fight. When it came to health, pirate camps had to be prepared for the frequent illnesses that arose from tropical conditions and long sea voyages. Disease was a constant threat, with fever, scurvy, dysentery, and wounds from combat or accidents regularly affecting the crew. Because of this, establishing a dedicated sick tent, or even a small house, was a priority. These quarantine areas allowed the sick to be separated from the healthy, which helped to limit the spread of illness. In the sick tent, men were given special care. This often included food designed to aid recovery, such as turtle broth or coconut milk, both of which were valued for their nutritional and restorative properties. If available, healing herbs were also used to treat various ailments. While specific documentation on these sick quarters is limited, it is clear from historical accounts that pirates understood the need to care for their crew to maintain their fighting strength. Life in a pirate camp, however, was not all about hard work and survival. The crew often spent much of their time drinking and feasting when not actively engaged in repairs or defense. Such social activities were important for morale but came with risks. Heavy drinking and partying could lead to lapses in discipline and vigilance, making the camp vulnerable to surprise attacks by naval forces or rival pirates. To counter these threats, pirates took steps to defend their camps. Their fortifications were usually rudimentary but effective enough to delay or repel attacks. Most commonly, these defenses consisted of earthworks constructed from sand taken from the beach. These earthen walls or ramparts were often mounted with cannons taken from the ships. Despite their simplicity, these fortifications could be formidable. One famous example was the defense organized by a pirate named Bannister. When naval forces attacked his careening camp, Bannister's battery stood firm, forcing the Navy to retreat after they ran out of ammunition. Although Bannister lost his flagship in the battle, his defenses bought his crew enough time to escape in smaller vessels. This incident illustrates that even the most basic fortifications could make a significant difference in a pirate's survival. In addition to building defenses, pirates actively scouted the surrounding waters and coastlines. Using canoes or smaller ships, they monitored enemy movements and sought opportunities to capture smaller, less defended vessels. This strategy of keeping a close watch on their environment helped prevent surprise attacks and sometimes even allowed the pirates to capture valuable resources and skilled workers. Before discussing how the pirates prepared their ships for maintenance, it's important to understand what careening involved. Careening was a process of beaching a ship and tipping it on its side to clean and repair the hull. This procedure was essential because wooden ships naturally accumulated barnacles, weeds, and other marine growths that slowed them down and weakened the hull. The first step in careening was to empty the ship completely. All cargo, cannons, furniture, and anything removable had to be taken off. The hold, often infested with rats and vermin, was smoked out by burning materials to chase the pests away. Then sails and rigging were taken down from the masts. To prevent flooding during the tipping process, all ports, hatches, and windows had to be securely closed. Pirates employed several methods to tip the ship over. The most common involved beaching the ship and using blocks and tackles attached to nearby trees to pull the ship onto its side. In cases where the shoreline was rocky or the water too shallow, they might use another vessel as a makeshift platform, sinking it to support the ship during careening. Once the ship was tipped, the bottom was cleaned of marine growth by a process called breaming. This involved holding burning bundles of reeds against the hull so that the layer of pitch and sulfur beneath the growth would ignite and burn off the infestations. After breaming, the hull was vigorously scraped to remove any remaining debris. Damaged planks were removed and replaced with fresh wood. To protect the inner hull from shipworms, a layer of sheathing was applied. This often included tar mixed with ingredients like pounded glass and cow's hair, which acted like barbed wire to trap and injure the worms. This protective layer was covered with thin planking, creating a barrier that was regularly repaired during careening. Because wooden ships were never fully airtight, the wood would swell and shrink with changes in temperature. Gaps inevitably appeared in the hull. To seal these, pirates used a material called oakum, which was made from old rope fibers coated in tar. Oakum could be produced from tree fibers or even coconut hair, depending on local resources. After the hull had been cleaned, repaired, and sealed, it was covered with a protective mixture called graving or greaving. This coating served multiple purposes. It prevented future infestations, lubricated the hull to improve speed, and acted as fuel if the ship needed to be burned to clear infestations. Different recipes for graving existed, but common ingredients included train oil, rosin, brimstone, tallow, soap, and sometimes arsenic to poison sea creatures. In addition to the hull, other wooden parts of the ship were treated with tar or turpentine to protect them from sun and weather damage. Spars, masts, rigging, and sails were repaired or replaced as needed. West Indian pirates, for example, made their own strong cordage from the bark of the maho tree, which was woven into ropes. Once repairs were complete, the ship was either loaded up again and set to sea or modified to improve performance. Modifications could include adding more guns, trimming heavy superstructures, or removing internal partitions to reduce weight. These adjustments made pirate ships faster and more agile, turning them into effective vessels for both attack and escape. Careening was a dangerous task. Pirate camps had to be well hidden and secure because the process left ships vulnerable to surprise attacks. Incompetence and drunkenness among pirates often led to accidents and losses during repairs. One tragic example involved Captain Edward Lowe, whose crew, eager to careen the ship quickly, forgot that he and the surgeon were still inside when the ship was tipped. 2 crew members drowned, and the ship and supplies were lost. Pirates generally maintained good relations with indigenous peoples, trading and sometimes allying with them. However, conflicts could be deadly. In 1723, Captain Lothar careened his ship on native land and was surprised by an attack, losing his flagship and plunder. To guard against such threats, pirate camps maintained patrols and watch duties. The story of pirate camps and their ship maintenance reveals a complex mix of skill, resourcefulness, and risk. Behind the romantic image of piracy lies a hard, practical life requiring careful planning and expertise. Without facilities like the smithy and processes like careening, pirate ships would not have survived long on the dangerous seas they roamed. After the initial setup of the pirate camp and the essential smithy, the next crucial task was caring for the ship itself. Ships were the lifeblood of any pirate crew, and their upkeep required constant attention. The process of cleaning, repairing, and maintaining a vessel was vital to keep it seaworthy and battle-ready. One of the most important maintenance procedures was careening, a labor-intensive operation that involved beaching the ship and tipping it onto its side to access the hull below the waterline. Before careening could begin, the ship had to be thoroughly emptied. Every piece of cargo, all the cannons, furniture, and any items that could be removed were taken off. This was necessary both to lighten the ship and to prevent damage to valuable goods during the tipping process. The ship's hold was often infested with rats and other vermin, which posed a threat to supplies and health. To deal with this, pirates would burn suitable materials inside the hold to create smoke, which helped drive out these pests. Next, the sails and rigging were taken down from the masts. These were valuable and delicate, so removing them protected them from damage while the ship was being careened. It was crucial to seal all ports, hatches, and windows securely. If any openings were left uncovered, water could flood the ship when it was tipped, causing it to sink or suffer significant damage. There were several methods pirates used to tip their ships on their sides. The most common involved beaching the vessel on a gently sloping shore and then using blocks and tackles attached to nearby trees or heavy anchors. The ropes were pulled tight to slowly heave the ship over. In some cases, if the shoreline was rocky or the water too shallow to beach the ship properly, pirates might sink another vessel deliberately near the shore. This sunken ship served as a makeshift platform on which the main vessel could be positioned and tipped safely. Once the ship was on its side, the main task was to clean the hull from the growths that had accumulated during its time in the water. Marine growths like barnacles, algae, and weeds would significantly slow the ship down and damage the wooden planking if left unchecked. To remove these, pirates performed a process called breaming. This involved holding burning bundles of reeds close to the hull's bottom. The heat would ignite the layer of pitch and sulfur beneath the marine growths, burning them off. After this, the hull was scraped vigorously to remove any remaining debris. With the hull clean, the pirates could inspect the wooden planks for damage caused by shipworms, rot, or combat. Shipworms were a particular threat in tropical waters and could cause extensive damage by burrowing into the wood. Damaged planks were carefully removed and replaced with fresh timber. To protect the hull from future infestations, a protective layer called sheathing was applied. This layer often consisted of tar mixed with materials such as pounded glass and cow's hair. The glass shards acted like tiny barbs, cutting and trapping the shipworms, while the tar provided waterproofing. Once the sheathing was applied, it was covered with a thin outer layer of planking for additional protection. This careful layering was necessary to extend the life of the ship's hull in hostile marine environments. The bottom of the hull, despite these protections, was never completely watertight. Wooden ships naturally leaked to some degree because the wood would shrink and swell with temperature and moisture changes. To reduce leaks, pirates used a process called caulking, where they filled the gaps between the planks with a material called oakum. Oakum was made by unraveling old rope fibers and soaking them in tar. Pirates could also produce oakum from natural fibers like tree bark or the hairy husks of coconuts. The tarred fibers were forced into the gaps between the planks, sealing them from water intrusion. This material was prone to damage from gunfire, weather, and vermin, so caulking had to be repaired frequently. To protect the caulk seams further, pirates would use a technique called parceling. This involved wrapping a length of cloth around the seam and then coating it with tar or pitch to glue it in place. After the hull had been cleaned, repaired, sealed, and protected, it was covered with a final coating known as graving or greaving. This coating served multiple purposes. Firstly, it prevented new infestations of marine organisms. Secondly, it lubricated the hull, allowing the ship to move more swiftly through the water. Lastly, it acted as a ready fuel source to burn off infestations if the hull was breamed again. Recipes for graving varied, but commonly included ingredients such as train oil, a type of whale oil, rosin, brimstone, tallow, and soap. Some recipes even included arsenic as a poison to deter sea creatures. Lime was another common ingredient, which gave the hull a distinctive white coating. Producing and acquiring these materials was often challenging. Pitch and tar especially were difficult to come by. Pirates would sometimes obtain these from local natives through trade, or raid supply caches. Many pirate crews had to be resourceful, making do with what they could find locally or salvage from captured ships. Repairing the ship was not limited to the hull. Other wooden parts, such as the spars and masts, were treated with protective substances like tar, turpentine, or even animal fats like hog's lard or tallow. This helped guard against sun damage and rot. Masts were sometimes shortened if damaged, or to make them easier to handle during repairs. The bases of masts were wrapped tightly with cables or rope to add stability. Ropes and rigging were critical components, and repairing or replacing them was an ongoing task. West Indian pirates, for example, crafted strong cordage from the bark of the mejo tree, which they stripped into fibers and twisted into rope. Sail makers were put to work patching torn sails, often using old clothing or canvas to mend holes. These repairs were crucial for maintaining speed and maneuverability at sea. In addition to repairs, pirates sometimes made modifications to their ships during careening. This could include adding more gun ports, installing swivel guns, or trimming heavy superstructures to reduce weight. Internal partitions were often removed to lighten the ship further and improve its handling. These changes helped transform pirate vessels into fast and deadly machines, capable of outrunning naval ships or other prey. Despite their experience, careening was not without risks. Choosing a secure and isolated location was essential. The process left ships vulnerable to surprise attacks from both the sea and land. Pirates had to be constantly vigilant, setting up patrols and guards to protect their camps and ships. Drunkenness and poor judgment among pirate crews also posed serious dangers during careening. Alcohol was a common part of pirate life, and it was not unusual for crews to become intoxicated even while performing risky tasks. Accidents were frequent and sometimes deadly. For instance, during the careening of Captain Edward Lowe's flagship, the crew's eagerness caused them to overlook key safety precautions. The captain and surgeon were still inside the ship when it was tipped, and 2 crew members drowned as a result. The loss of the ship and provisions forced the crew to rely on smaller vessels and limited rations. Relations with indigenous peoples were generally peaceful, as pirates often relied on them for supplies, trade, or information. However, tensions could lead to violence if pirate crews trespassed on native lands or disrespected local customs. In one notable case in 1723, Captain Lothar careened his ship on native territory, which led to a surprise attack. The pirates barely escaped but lost their flagship and valuable loot. This incident highlighted the importance of diplomacy and caution when dealing with local populations. To prevent such losses, pirate camps implemented various defensive measures, including patrols, sentries, and earthwork fortifications. These defenses were often simple but effective enough to delay attackers, buying time for the pirates to either mount a counterattack or escape. The defenses erected by Bannister, for example, successfully repelled a naval assault despite the loss of his flagship. This allowed his crew to flee and avoid capture. The careening process and related ship maintenance activities reveal the technical knowledge and adaptability of pirate crews. While their lifestyle is often romanticized, the reality was one of hard work, skill, and constant risk. Without the ability to repair and maintain their ships, pirates would have been unable to survive long at sea or carry out their raids effectively. The complexity of ship care and repair also speaks to the broader pirate economy, which depended not only on looting but also on craftsmanship, trade, and resourcefulness. The combination of skilled smiths, carpenters, sailmakers, and riggers kept pirate ships operational even far from home ports or supply chains. In this way, pirate camps were more than just temporary shelters, they were centers of innovation and survival. The men who operated them had to be masters of many trades, capable of building, repairing, and defending their floating homes in some of the most challenging environments on Earth. This practical expertise was as important to their success as their fighting skills or daring raids. Beyond the essential tasks of ship maintenance and camp construction, the daily life of pirates was marked by a mixture of hardship, ingenuity, and often chaos. While their reputation for lawlessness and revelry is well known, the practical realities of sustaining a pirate crew in remote locations required careful organization and a range of skills beyond mere fighting. One of the most important aspects of pirate life on shore was the creation of shelters and facilities for various needs, including medical care, defense, and leisure. Pirates were well aware of the risks they faced, from disease, injury, and fatigue. Tropical climates, especially in the Caribbean and South Seas, were rife with illnesses like fever, scurvy, and dysentery. These ailments could quickly decimate a crew if left untreated, so having a dedicated sick tent or house was a priority whenever possible. These sick quarters provided a place to isolate those who were ill, preventing the spread of contagious diseases to healthy crew members. Pirates would offer special foods thought to aid recovery, such as turtle broth or coconut milk, which were more nourishing and hydrating than the typical hardtack and salted meat diets. If available, healing herbs and local remedies might be gathered or traded for, as medical knowledge was limited and largely based on trial and error. Although historical records about these medical facilities are sparse, it's logical to conclude that pirates had some form of rudimentary treatment areas. Their priority was survival, and anything that increased the chances of crew members recovering from wounds or sickness was valuable. However, pirates were also notorious for their hard partying, and leisure often took precedence over discipline. After the work of setting up camp and maintaining ships was done, much of the crew's time was spent drinking, feasting, and gambling. This culture of revelry was part of what made pirate life appealing to many sailors who otherwise faced harsh discipline in Navy or merchant service. Yet this indulgence came with risks. Excessive drinking weakened vigilance and made the camp vulnerable to surprise attacks by naval forces or rival pirate hunters. To guard against these threats, pirates needed to establish defenses around their camps. These were typically simple earthworks made from sand or dirt taken from nearby areas. The defensive positions would be mounted with cannons taken from their ships, turning a beach or clearing into a makeshift fortress. Despite their rough construction, these fortifications could be surprisingly effective. One notable example involved a pirate named Bannister, whose battery successfully repelled a naval assault. Although his flagship was sunk in the battle, the defenses he set up allowed his crew to hold out until the attackers ran out of ammunition. This type of defense bought precious time and often meant the difference between capture or escape. Pirates also took offensive measures while encamped. Scouts would use canoes or smaller ships to explore the surrounding waters. These scouts looked for enemy movements, potential prizes, or specialists who might be recruited or coerced into service. It was a constant balancing act between enjoying the relative safety of the camp and staying alert to the ever-present dangers of naval patrols and rival crews. Once the camp was secure and the ship maintained, the pirates would prepare to careen the vessel. Careening was vital to the ship's long-term seaworthiness, but it was a complex and dangerous operation. As mentioned previously, it required the vessel to be emptied and tipped onto its side, usually on a suitable beach or tidal area. The careening process began with removing all cargo, armaments, and anything else that could be taken off the ship. The hold was cleaned and fumigated to remove vermin. Sails and rigging were carefully taken down and stored. Ports and hatches had to be sealed tightly to prevent flooding. The ship was then tipped over by pulling it down on its side with ropes attached to trees or other strong anchors. Once careened, the hull was scraped clean of marine growths. Burning bundles of reeds were used to bream the hull, setting fire to the pitch and sulfur layer beneath the barnacles and seaweed, which then burned away. This fire was carefully controlled to avoid damage to the ship itself. After breaming, vigorous scraping removed any remaining debris. Damaged planks were replaced, and the hull was sealed with mixtures of tar, pounded glass, and fibers to protect against shipworms. Oakum was packed into the seams to reduce leaks. The hull was then coated with a protective layer called graving, often made from a combination of tallow, rosin, brimstone, and sometimes poisonous additives like arsenic. This coating lubricated the hull, prevented new infestations, and improved the ship's speed. This process was repeated on both sides of the ship. During this time, other repairs might be made, such as mending sails, shortening or stabilizing masts, replacing rigging, and patching the hull above the waterline. Pirates often salvaged wood and materials from shipwrecks or sunken prizes to carry out these repairs. Despite all these precautions, careening was risky. The ship was vulnerable to attack and accidents were common. Crews had to remain vigilant, organizing patrols and guards to protect their camp. Pirates' own behavior could also cause problems. Drunkenness and carelessness sometimes led to injuries or loss of equipment. One infamous example involved Captain Edward Lowe, whose crew careened his flagship with dangerous haste. They forgot to close the ship's ports and left the captain and surgeon inside during the tipping. Water flooded in and 2 crewmen drowned. The ship and its provisions were lost. forcing the pirates to survive aboard a smaller vessel with limited supplies. Relations with indigenous peoples were generally cautious but pragmatic. Pirates often relied on native communities for trade, supplies, or information. Attacking or upsetting local populations could lead to serious consequences, as seen when Captain Lothar trespassed on native land in 1723. His camp was attacked, the flagship lost, and the crew barely escaped with their lives. Pirates therefore took steps to maintain friendly or at least neutral relations with local inhabitants, understanding the value of good alliances in remote regions. However, tensions could arise and they had to be ready to defend themselves. Defending pirate camps involved erecting earthworks and mounting cannons to cover likely approaches. Patrols and sentries were established to watch for enemy movements. Despite their makeshift nature, these defenses could be effective, allowing pirates to hold off better-equipped naval forces long enough to escape or regroup. The combination of ship maintenance, camp construction, medical care, defense, and the ever-present risk of attack created a challenging environment for pirate crews. Their survival depended on a mix of practical skills, ingenuity, discipline, and sometimes sheer luck. Pirates were not just reckless criminals, but resourceful seafarers who mastered multiple trades and adapted to harsh conditions. The care and repair of their ships was as vital to their success as their combat abilities. Without well-maintained vessels, they could not have launched raids, escaped pursuit, or survived long at sea. Their camps, while often temporary, functioned as hubs of activity where diverse skills were employed. From skilled blacksmiths crafting nails and tools, to carpenters repairing woodwork, to sailmakers patching sails, each member of the crew contributed to the overall operation. This practical expertise was essential in an era when pirates had no access to formal dockyards or supply chains. Their ability to improvise and maintain their ships and equipment was a major factor in their resilience. At the same time, the lifestyle of pirates was marked by contradictions. They were both disciplined and disorderly, focused on survival but prone to excess, fiercely independent yet reliant on cooperation. These contradictions defined pirate society and contributed to its unique culture and mythology. The story of pirate camps and ship care offers insight into the realities behind the romanticized image of pirates. It shows them as hardworking, skilled, and adaptable, facing constant challenges from nature, enemies, and their own human weaknesses. Understanding these aspects helps us appreciate the complexity of pirate life and the remarkable ingenuity that allowed these outlaws to thrive in some of the most hostile environments of their time.